Welcome back to another edition of the Founder Spotlight. I have Scotty Hunter here today from Coastalo THC. Welcome, Scotty. How you doing today?
Lars, doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So your background is in chemical engineering, and that led you to brewing and, ultimately transitioning from a college homebrew club to launching Urban Artifact. What was that? What sparked that transition?
Yeah, a little bit of naivete, also just being bullheaded to a degree. I worked for some great people in my career before starting the brewery and then the hemp beverage brand that we have now. But I found that, people change jobs and cultures change in corporate America. And it always felt, a couple of my business partners, Brett and Scott, that it could be done better, right? People could enjoy showing up to their job every single day. Obviously, not every day is great, right? There's still some days that suck, but we wanted to do something that we like doing, provide that to other people, as many as we could. So that's kind of where that really originated, and then to kind of maybe get a little bit more specific about how the brewery started and that ideation. It started out as a love for beer, and then also seeing what we felt was a gap in the market that I think we've kind of proven out to this point. And really that gap was in the fruit tart sour category of craft beers. When we set up brands, we want them to have a very clear market position, focus, and expertise and niche. So that's how we started everything. We don't want to be everything to everybody because we don't think that's how any long-standing brands have ever been successful in the grand scheme of things.
So what year did Urban Artifact officially launch?
Yeah, we opened in April of 2015. We bought our property in August of 14, so we turned it around about 8-9 months, and we thought that was too long. We come to find out, right, that especially, starting up a brewery, tap room space, all the things that we did, most people take twice that amount of time to get that off the ground. So again, that's us just not knowing any better and saying, hey, here's what we want to do, here's our goals, and we're going to do our best to execute on that.
Yeah, and how big are you guys from a barrel or cases sold standpoint now?
Yeah, we're a touch over 10,000 barrels as far for beer specifically. Mm-hmm. And so that puts us already in the top 3% of breweries across the country, which to me is crazy because I know what the size of our business is, mm-hmm. and compared to the large beverage brands, we don't even exist on the radar to them. So it's just wild to think about in both respects. In one lens that we can be considered large, right, relatively, mm-hmm. speaking, but general business and other types of metrics were mm-hmm. tiny.
Yeah, they keep moving the needle for independent breweries based on Boston beer.
They do, and I've wrestled with that over the years, and ultimately, because we were in Cincinnati, and I don't think a lot of people realize, but Boston Beer has one of their largest plants in Cincinnati, just 7 minutes away from us, and they have always been a great resource for mm-hmm. the area brands, not only from a production, laboratory testing situation, but they host events regularly where, a startup or you're interested, they give resources and information. So, I know that it probably missed some people that want to have this very clear defined definition of craft. At the same time, they still operate in terms of the ethos of what craft beer started as, and the resources that they provide are just so valuable.
Yeah, I love their summer lager and their Oktoberfest. For the most part, those are the only two that I ever buy. Well, I don't drink anymore, but when I did, those were the only two I ever bought. So I do like them, but so it is interesting how they keep moving the goalposts.
Yeah.
So Urban Artifact, you mentioned it a little bit before, but how you are niched down in the market, but you guys have become known as the largest dedicated fruit brewery in the world. So what inspired that specific focus on fruit beers, and then how did you identify that market opportunity?
Yeah, so it really started with the broader sour beer category, and that's where we saw the biggest gap in the market. Back when we started home brewing at Ohio University, and getting out into industry. Really, all that was available on the market were going to be traditionally barrel-aged sour beers that oftentimes are funky, some that were more fruit-forward, but then also they could be a little too acidic, and then lastly price point format was not really accessible to the general consumer. So most people, when they think of beer, they think of a six-pack, right? They don't think of a 500, 750 milliliter bottle, right? And there's still a little bit of a market, but it's very, very tiny, infinitesimal, really. We felt, hey, these beverages are great. Using acid to balance in a beer is beautiful. Like you can remove bitterness, you can drive the perception of fruit flavors and aromas. It does all these things and it opens up so much opportunity that we felt that's where we could, really excel. So we started out a little bit broader when we first ramped up sour and wild beers, and then we further just kind of refined. We had some more just traditional sour beers in terms of like things that were unfruited, and really the consumer response wasn't there, right? There were some people that enjoyed it, but we found our most success when we started doing our fruited lines that we'd always planned on doing on a seasonal nature. And then just, we make it a big focus to listen to what our consumers are saying and our feedback, and then distilling that down and creating things that we expect that they're going to like. And we're not always right. And we don't directly listen to consumers usually one for one, because I think if you say that's what you do and you don't really interpret what they mean, you're not going to make great decisions, because it's just not how things play out. So anyway, that's what we saw as the gap on the market, and that's where we focused, again, hearkening back to having a clear focus to be able to say, here's who we are, here's what we do. And that's helped in a couple ways, right? I think it's helped us build more brand loyalty than other brewers have over time, because if somebody tries one of our seasonals or one of our flagships at a bar, say, and then they're like, okay, I really like that, I'm going to go pick something up at the store. Maybe that product that they tasted on premise isn't necessarily there, but there's other products. I'm confident as long as they like that fruit or fruit combination, they're going to like what they pick up at the store. You can't say that for other brands, right? If somebody tries maybe the summer seasonal that's like, summer lager from Sam Adams, or, maybe it's something that's lightly fruited, and then they go to the store and there's only pale ales and IPAs from that brand, they pick that up, it's not likely going to be a conversion, a long-term conversion for that customer, because usually those are not necessarily going to be, that same flavor profile that person likes. So, that, I think that's benefited us a lot there. And then, in addition to that, we're able to garner distribution in markets that I think most other brands have a hard time doing with a more general portfolio, because it doesn't necessarily add as much value to the market, to the distributor, to the retailers, because they already have things in their local market that are similar, right? Like there's great pale ales, there's great IPAs, there's great light beers produced in every state, every territory, every major city. So we've been able to get our beer brand up to 20 states in terms of total distribution, and that's pretty darn rare in this day and age.
Yeah. So are you guys doing like kettle sours, or do you guys do a barrel age program, or how do you guys handle that process?
Yeah, we had a barrel program, but 5-6 years ago, every brand with any amount of success was announcing a barrel program, right?
Yeah.
And that market wasn't growing, right? It was kind of what it was. You had some people trying things out because that was the craft beer craze and people throwing things in a cellar, but it wasn't really growing. So a few years ago, we decided to kill off our barrel program. We still have some products, some vintage products that we actually sell. I wish that it was more viable, right? But like the amount of work for the revenue that we could get for that just didn't make any sense. So the way we produce today is we have a house pitch of lacto that we caught on our site from the bell tower of the church that's banked at Omega Yeast Labs. We get new pitches as we needed, produced by them. And we do things a little bit differently. So we actually do our lacto fermentation in a fermenter, pre-hopped, pre-spice, anything like that. That gets us that nice round level of acidity that's so, kind of the calling card outside of the fruit to our products. That then, not to get super technical, that gets sent back to the boil kettle, we kill off those bacteria because those are, tough to handle downward down in the process in terms of contamination. And then we just finish the beer off like anybody would normally, so boiling it, adding our hops, things like that, and then chilled down, sent to a fermenter, and then gets fruit added.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I promise we will get to THC beverages here in a minute. Not to turn this into a beer conversation. One of the barrel age programs that I haven't followed up on them in a long time because again I don't drink anymore. That had a great program was Brewery Turo. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them out of I think somewhere in California.
Oh yeah.
And so I used to love buying their 750 their bombers, and so they're probably the only barrel age program that I personally like actively sought out. And I was a big sour guy when I was drinking.
Yeah, they make a great product. And next time you make your way up to Cleveland, I'll point out a couple C stores where you can probably find some vintage bottles still collecting dust on shelves. Although you don't drink now, so I guess it's not as useful, but it's maybe a little bit of nostalgia just to see it in the wild.
Yeah, there was a gas station I used to go to all the time. I used to live down in Miami, and so like this gas station, literally just like a normal gas station, tiny little store inside, and they were like the original bottle shop in Miami, and so they had like a ton of Brewery Turo, and then all kinds of different products. They probably had, I would guess, 100 different brands on the shelf at least, and tiny. They maybe had 2,000 square feet inside this gas station, so it was really cool. So during the pandemic, you guys kind of shifted to a direct-to-consumer shipping strategy and helped you guys get through the pandemic and everything like that. What led to that decision, and how has that evolved over the last 5 years now?
Yeah, for people that don't know, direct-to-consumer shipping laws for beer are tough. There's very limited market access. It's not like wine. The wine industry has spent decades lobbying to get favorable legislation in 40, I think, plus states. In beer, it's like 11 total. Depending on what state you're in, you might actually be down one or two there. So anyway, we had always looked at that model, adding that as part of our business, but we didn't feel that there was enough consumer interest in it for it to be viable. But then the pandemic happens, right? And people are shopping online a lot more. We're like, okay, we don't know what it's going to be. And we definitely didn't expect what it became that year. But we think this is going to be a nice avenue. Hopefully we can start to really get some consumers in this type of programming and this mindset, because the benefit on a small producer side of things is that direct consumer channel can give you market access for people that love your brand, that are excited about your brand. It can allow you to sell things that you might still want to produce and has a market there, but it's not enough to go through like a traditional distributor, traditional retail shelves, because it doesn't have enough pull for it to find those right customers. So we went for it, and I tell people every time that we kind of walk through our facility that in 2020 our direct sales, and I group kind of tap room on site and then the online sales together, were actually positive in 2020 from 2020 or 2019, which, yes, incredible, right? Like nobody believes it. We shipped 500 barrels worth of beer, which, Breeze will scoff at that. That's a week for them, but anybody else that is in beer realizes how much volume that actually is. And the other thing that was beneficial for us is our brand already likened itself to that direct consumer, because we do have such that specific niche. We still had a lot of the barrel age projects and things like that make more economical sense to ship, right? So we still have that program. It is still definitely a nice chunk of our business, but it's definitely morphed, right? We have one-off orders, and then the majority of orders are a couple different clubs. So we have like a specialty release club, and then we have a more general, like, hey, here's our seasonals, and here's a new core, here's a refresher on this core, quarterly type of programming. So it's definitely super successful and allowed us to, enter into fulfillment for our hemp beverage brand as well seamlessly, because we were already set up with the framework and resources to do that.
Yeah, that was going to be my next little pivot there around Coastalo. So, let's kind of take it back to the beginning there. What inspired the decision to enter the THC beverage market, the hemp-derived market, if you will. And how does your experience with fruit forward brewing influence the new venture as well?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, like I drink less and less. I still drink a little bit, but I tell people I'm kind of bad at drinking. Like I'll get a hangover after one, maybe two drinks. And I also have a young child. So I had found myself for a while really cutting back on alcohol. And, through some friends and family, I'd get access to cannabis products, in low dose form that I thoroughly enjoyed. And that became my personal preference. So, there was that piece of it. And then, also market opportunity and differentiating our business a little bit because, alcohol is going to ebb and flow. I know there's a lot of chatter about, hey, alcohol is in a decline and it's going to, fall off the map. I don't think that's the case. Anyway, it allowed us to enter into a new beverage market that could still utilize kind of our core business practices of understanding positioning, having a niche, product formulation, distribution, right? I think a lot of people when they get into beverage, if they don't have that familiarity with distribution, they don't understand how important that piece is going to be to their business in terms of long-term success. Because beverages are heavy, direct consumer model is, I think, tough, right? There are some stalwarts that people will point to, but even looking at some of those, you can see that those founders are already eyeing traditional retail as things grow and develop. So it was a number of factors, and I think us producing 1,000 different products in our 10 years, that type of formulation really positioned us to create a great tasting beverage that was uniquely different than rest of market, and then also take things that we've learned from just general consumer behavior on how they interact with brands, add some innovation, whether that be package size, format. I think I'm pretty excited about our seasonal lines that I haven't really seen anybody else produce anything like that in. And some of it may not work, right? Because it worked in craft beer doesn't mean it's going to work other places, but people are people, right? When it's Christmas time, they want something Christmas themed. They're not going to change. And especially if you've decided as a consumer that either, I'm going to be X number of times per month consumer of hemp beverages, like that's still going to entice you. You're still going to want that thematic beverage at those certain points in time of the year.
Yeah. And also, not to go on a soapbox here, but when I first started the newsletter, brands kept sending me new products. And so I was drinking them much more often because I had no idea how many brands there actually were when I first started.
Yeah.
Was similar to you. I was getting hangovers very easily, and I'd already started mixing in NA beers like in between regular beers, and so that was kind of I quit unintentionally. Is what I always tell people.
Yeah, that's a good way to go about it, I guess, right? Because the opposite end of that is usually a little bit more difficult to grapple with.
Yeah. So the seasonal lines, I think it was like Christmas cookie was the Christmas flavor, and then
That's correct.
Was it pumpkin spice latte or pumpkin spice something else?
Yeah, just pumpkin spice. Yeah, we went just a little more general there for sure.
Yeah. So let's break some news here. What's the spring seasonal?
So the spring seasonal, and I think if you know beer at all, the spring seasonal is always the toughest one because, and this might not be the case in hemp beverages. We'll see because we get hopefully a nice bump from dry January, but it's always a tough one to hey, people are usually cutting back on dollars because they just spent a lot during the holidays. So we're trying something that I personally love as a concept, and it's kind of a thunderbolt. So if you've ever had like a lemonade topped with a shot of espresso, it's that concept, but in a ready-to-drink form. And we'll probably get that out in like February timeframe. We've got a couple other products that we want to get going that are going to be year-rounds that we want to focus on first. And so I'm very excited to see what the response to that flavor combination is, because I don't think a lot of people just generally in the U.S. understand what that is, because I've only had it at one or two coffee shops across the country, and I've traveled quite a lot for beer sales, and I hunt down good coffee shops, as one of my very nerdy things that I get
Same.
into. So I think I have a good perspective on what's out there.
Yeah. So I have a couple follow-up questions based on some of your answers here on the last couple ones. So are you guys able to sell Coastalo in Urban Artifacts taproom?
Yeah, and it's been a great resource because that direct feedback from the consumer is so valuable, and it allows us to test things out a lot more rapidly than other brands probably have the ability to do. And the fun thing too that I'm really excited about is draft, because I think that's a way to really get the on-premise channel on board, with this category. And the thing that I'm most excited even within draft is even lower dose draft than, I think a lot of people in cannabis consider 5 milligrams as low dose. And I'm a lightweight, so even for me, that's not low enough necessarily.
Same.
So, we have a 2 milligram per 12 ounce item on draft that we did just a very small run of our red cream soda. It's effectively 2.5 per 16. It can be poured in a pint. It can check all these boxes that, and this is me, opening up the curtain a little bit, right? But I think it can check all these boxes that the on-premise, if they're going to put it on draft, is going to need in order to be successful. And then, with that, too, this is probably going to continue to be a topic of conversation in the hemp beverage space. Fortunately for us, our emulsion suppliers working with us to do some long-term stability studies on those draft kegs to see, hey, are we getting, kind of the right parameters before we really, get this out to too many accounts? Like, are we seeing, well-mixed kegs so that the dosages are what we're expecting time and time again? And that type of information data, I think, is going to be super valuable, not only for us as a brand, right, for selling it, but I think the total category too, so that when, regulators come in and, they propose rules, we can say, hey, here's draft, here's why it works, here's the data to support it. And that'll just further the space and the broadness of the category, because we're so off-premise focused, right? And I know that some people are going to poo-poo brands being built on-premise, but it's so much easier for somebody to spend $6 trial, or even just a little sample.
Exactly. The same thing with beer.
Yep.
So when you guys are pouring the drafts, you said 16 ounce, obviously soda is carbonated. So does the 2.5, when you go up there and you get, obviously I know it doesn't give a head necessarily, but the carbonation towards the top, when you fill it, like how does that measuring for the 2.5 come into play based on the carbonation and things like that?
Yeah, because there isn't any significant head, you just, based on our glassware, fill it brim full. And the calculation really ends up being, standard shaker pints are 16 ounces, but they never get filled exactly 16 ounces. It's more like 15 total. And so that's
how ice in that too?
We offer it if consumers want it, but we don't.
Okay. So the 2.5 is based on filling it fully to 16 ounces with no ice.
Correct.
Okay, cool. And then another follow-up question I had was sodas. What made you guys want to go into sodas versus, let's say, a social tonic or a seltzer or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, so we felt that from what we know about how consumers respond to different flavor concepts and name and flavor expectations, that the broader consumer, they don't want something that's super complex, right? Like there's some really cool mocktails and flavor combos that brands are putting out, and knowing consumers, a lot of those to me are going to be tough to digest, like just people understanding. And I tell this story of one of our really good friends that we went to college with, who's helped us at the brewery, built things and loves our brand. We made a beer one year with currants, right? And he's sitting there drinking, and I'm over hanging out with him, and he's like, "Scotty, you guys spelled currant wrong." I was like, "What?" I was like, "What are you talking about, Colin?" He's like, "Yes, Currant." I was like, "No, that is a fruit. That's how you spell it, Currant." My whole point was saying that is, I think we think that consumers maybe care more about like specific ingredients in their beverages than they really do when you really get from a broad scale. And it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be a lot of opportunity for that. So
I'm one of those nerds.
We wanted to go with, sorry, what's that?
I said I'm one of those nerds that like to know like everything.
Yeah,
and like the science behind it and everything like that. But I know how I shop is not how the average consumer shops, whether that be
exactly.
coffee, cannabis, whatever. I know I'm an outlier.
Exactly. Just people don't want to feel dumb, right?
Correct.
So if they don't know what something is, they're not likely to purchase it because they don't want to be wrong. So
Right.
when you give something that's straightforward, simple, and digestible, that's where you can be successful. And, I guess to go into that allowed us to play on some nostalgic flavors, right? Like red cream soda is a super, super, super nostalgic flavor, especially in the region that we are in the kind of greater Cincinnati, Midwest region. We have an orange soda, we have a grape soda, cherry cola, and we'll be able to continue to riff on those and create some flavors that are maybe more fruit soda than they are classic. Like we're not going to do a root beer, right? I feel confident in saying that. There's plenty of brands already doing that. We're fruit forward is where our expertise is, and that's where we'll continue to push and lean. And then I guess the last piece on that too is we wanted a full flavored beverage. From our perspective, the point of these is very experiential, and when you really drill down to it, like I'm not trying to chase the consumer that needs a 0-calorie item, right? There's other brands that are doing that's fine. And maybe someday we do develop that, I guess, at some point in time. We get the brand big enough. But I view this as experiential. People want to taste something that is good, right? It gives them, I don't know, some juice. They get excited about drinking it. And realistically, too, if you can say under that, 100-calorie mark per serving, you're right there with light beer. And I think light beer to me has really set a precedent for like what is a low cal beverage to a degree, right? If you're not talking straight zero. So as long as you're there or below, I think you're in a good spot with consumers. And that's kind of what we've seen as far as a feedback is concerned. I've gotten like next to zero. Maybe there's been one person saying, "Hey, there's too many calories on this for me." It's like, let's, I guess, go get a gummy or a shot. There's a lot of other ways to get your hemp without consuming a whole 12-ounce can.
And I've heard other brands and people mention that it's hard to make a hemp derived beer because you have to get like the TTB involved and things like that. Do you guys have aspirations to do an infused like non-alcoholic beer?
No.
Okay.
No. People that are going down that road, like kudos to them. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I mentioned this to somebody yesterday, and maybe that's somebody that doesn't necessarily, maybe they're getting their beer or their brand produced by somebody else. But to me, for me, I'm not risk adverse, but that one is a little bit too risky for me. I don't want to deal with the TTB. I know how they can be, and their lack of understanding of smaller brand beverage is pretty astounding. These conversations of trying to get formulation approved, labels approved, things like that. So I know there's people pushing that. I know that there's some interest, I guess, in the market. I don't think that's going to be a major subsect. I can be completely wrong there, but I think your light beer drinker is going to probably stick with beer or go with something that's differently flavored, because if they're deciding to quit beer, why would they want something reminiscent of the thing that they quit?
So I will tell you, I am one of those subset, and as I said earlier, I am not an average consumer. I just think that, assuming that we can get, good regulations around it and it's allowed and everything like that. So assuming we live in that nice world in the future, but the hops playing in conjunction with the terpenes and things from the cannabis, I think just plays well together. And then in addition, the best in a beer that I've had was a hemp infused product. And so I think they had like 5 or 6 different types of hops in it. It was an IPA, so it was very hoppy and very full flavored, but like I would have drank 10 of them even without the THC in it. So
have you had Lagunitas hop water?
I have had their hop water, yes.
Okay. See, like that to me, like I would get excited about that because you get the hop flavor and aroma, and I think again that would blend. So I'll be curious. I haven't actually had a chance to try any of them myself. I'm still a beer lover, and if I could also get like something like crispy lager, with some THC, I would definitely be excited about that. But I'll make my prediction that subsection will be more like Saison is in the beer category, where it'll exist and there will be diehards, but I think
also love Saison.
Yeah, I figured as much.
Yeah. Awesome. So this is not to make this a beer podcast, but do you guys make any non-alcoholic beers as well?
We do. We have a line we call Seedless because we're very fruit beer forward.
I think we were messaging about this. I think on Twitter, I believe. Yeah, I forgot about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So it's only a year old for that product line. So we have a strawberry and a mango are the two flavors that we carry now. We're looking at potentially doing a variety pack of it because the way I describe it to people is it's more fruit soda than it is anything else because it is so fruit forward with how we do flavor creation. So I'm excited about where that brand can go because it's not competing with the athletics of the world of the best days, people like that, right? Like it's not a golden, it's not an IPA, it's not this or that. So I think we can garner spots on the shelves that we wouldn't maybe otherwise with a more standard product.
Gotcha. And then, as we look forward at both Urban Artifact and Coastalo, what excites you the most, about the future of cannabis beverages and, what challenges do you anticipate over, let's call it, the next 3 years?
Yeah, I'm super excited about the cannabis beverage market. I think it fits in a spot that just consumers haven't had the ability to entertain before. So, we're in this region that is still very underdeveloped. Ohio is the most developed market that we're probably actively in, right? Compared to like Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee's a little bit further along, but we're only in the Memphis market there. I think there's not boundless room to grow. I think people need to temper their expectations because that education piece takes time. Like we've been active in the state of West Virginia for months and it's slow, right? Like I think there's a lot of people with licenses, we're getting product into stores, but we're one of only a couple beverage brands in the state. So I'm excited. I think it's got a lot of legs. I think it's here to stay. I think we're gonna fight regulation, on and off. We're in this I don't think it'll ever be as bad as prohibition was for beer, back in the 1920s, but in certain markets it's going to go that way, but it's going to ebb and flow. And I think we'll start to see, and maybe it's not in 3 years, but in 5 plus to 10 years, some more homogeneity in terms of regulation state to state and simplified so that, brands know what to expect, distributors, retailers, everybody kind of has an expectation of what that looks like. I think the interesting thing is going to be, low dose beverages have been the most accepted, 5-10 milligrams, what have you, but where do things, that are more potent live, whether that be, a canned beverage or if that's something that's meant to be a mixer? How do draft kegs play into this? Because it's not a one-to-one. It's going to have to be a carve out within, certain regulations because a lot of times there's a potency cap on a container. So I think there's just going to be a lot of hurdles and just a lot of there might be quite a bit of stopping and starting in different markets depending on how regulations play out.
So I always like to end these conversations with, besides Coastalo, what other THC or, cannabis beverage brands do you enjoy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I've been fortunate because we do co-pack a few different brands at our facility as well. To enjoy quite a few of those brands. One that I think is super fun and unique that we just made their first production, large scale production run here in December. It's called St. Rains. They blend in, their aim is to be more strain specific in terms of their different flavors of their beverages. So there's some cool terpenes that are added. So it's very different from what our brand is, right? Our brand is meant to be fruit forward and soda, and that's the primary flavor driver. They're giving you this cannabis experience with their beverage that I haven't really come across as much in the market. And I've really enjoyed because when you're talking to some of those flavors and aromas akin to hops, it scratches a little bit more of that itch. So I'm excited to see what they can do, and I'm going to try to, help them along and make some connections because I think it does offer something unique to the market that other brands aren't already doing, at least that I'm aware of, right? There's still so many brands that I don't even know.
They love the idea. It's something that I definitely want to see more of. They might be a little early to the current consumer education level.
I agree. I agree. I think there will be, I think any brand entering the market at this point, depending on where you are, what state you're trying to enter, what have you, it's going to be tougher than it was a year ago at this time. So we'll see. It's going to be, can you crack through from a distributor level and get them to understand what that beverage brand is trying to do in the market so that they understand, okay, this is why it's valuable. this is where we slot it, this is how we position it. It's going to be super interesting to see what that uptick's like.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you subscribed to the newsletter or not, and if you read it this morning, but one of my predictions was, the novelty of cannabis beverages wearing out, in my opinion, and that, not to sound harsh, but a lot of these brands were riding those coattails and not building an actual brand and telling their story and what that means. So I do think you're right in that, it's much harder to enter the market now, and it's going to be a lot harder to be profitable and stick around.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yes, I did see that in the newsletter this morning. And I think I've already seen and heard that sentiment from distributors, distributors that are already active in the space and doing well with it. They're self-limiting on the number of brands they're going to carry. And maybe that expands out, if shelf space expands out enough. But I think what a lot of distributors learned from the craft beer boom and the seltzer craze and RTDs is like, maybe be a little more measured, pick a handful of brands that you think are fit for, whatever reasons you have. And then you can always add in more later, instead of like, hey, let's bring in 20 brands right off the rip and throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. So I've seen a more measured approach from a distributor level that I'm just not used to.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Scotty. And until next time, guys, cheers.
Thanks, Lars. Appreciate it.